Hi, everyone. Welcome to CanWin's 8th annual Global Action Day for Comfort Women Justice. My name is Denise, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Sexual Assault Program Specialist at CanWin, and I'll be the MC for today. So if you want to turn on closed captioning, please go to the bottom of your Zoom window. There should be a CC icon, and then an option to turn on subtitles. And if not, you will need to go to the Zoom website at zoom.us to turn on closed captioning from the settings menu. All right, so every year we host a rally in downtown Chicago to take action for comfort women justice. This year, we are so excited to be able to hold this rally virtually with community members from all over. That is just so amazing. We had over about 100 people sign up for the event. And so even though we are on Zoom due to circumstance, let's also recognize that connecting in this manner is also truly in spirit with the Comfort Women movement, which has been and will continue to be international in character. People of all backgrounds and interests are in solidarity with the survivors. What do you think this tells us? Well, we'll see today. But I am going to call attention to one apparent takeaway to help set the tone. It's that, after all, violence on the basis of gender and sex is upsettingly commonplace. You might even call it universal. And when we throw in things like imperialism, ageism, militarism, we can see the particularities that have helped set the comfort women issue into such a long-standing, painful, and seemingly intractable one. Next slide, please. Just a few technical difficulties. All right, so I also want to emphasize that the comfort women issue only seems intractable and without resolution, because in fact, there's actually a lot we can do together, which is why we're here today, right? We have a message and we want to broadcast it. We know about the injustice, the horror, the crime, the inhumanity, all of it, right? We know all of it. So today we're going to do something about it. For us at CanWin, we're working to make those steps toward redress that much more tangible. We're a nonprofit that supports survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Our mission is to eradicate gender-based violence. To help make this vision our reality, our work is trauma-informed, culturally grounded, and survivor-centered. We provide direct services while also focusing on education and organizing as ways to engage our community on the roots of violence so that they can imagine a world without it. And we don't see direct services and community engagement as necessarily distinct. The feedback loop between the two is exactly why CanWin is dedicated to comfort women advocacy. I also want to thank our co-sponsors, HANA Center, Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline, APNAGAR, Awakenings Gallery, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Chicago, the Korean Council for Justice and Remembrance for the Issues of Military Sexual Slavery by Japan, VAI, or Vietnamese Association for Illinois, CBCAC, or Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community, Healing to Action, NAPAF Chicago, the Korean Churches Federation of Greater Chicago Social Committee, the Network, KA Voice, and Gabriella Chicago. CanWin is super ecstatic to be here with you today. Without your support, this event would not be the same. All right, before I dive into what we have in store for today, let's go over some brief housekeeping. Firstly, my team and I thank you in big advance for your grace and patience in the event that we hit any technical difficulties or lags. It's been a Zoom summer and the learning curve is still there. It's pretty tricky. And secondly, today's events will be touching on the topics of sexual violence, survivorship, and intergenerational and cross-border trauma. These topics can be difficult, so I want to remind everyone to stretch, grab some water, and anything else that you may need to feel grounded. All right. On screen, you can see the agenda for today. We will start with Dr. Liz Sun, who will talk about the history and survivor leadership of the Comfort Women movement. Next are two videos, one that documents our 2020 socially distant rally in downtown Chicago, and another composed of community members' reflections on sitting with the Sonyasang Statue of Peace. From there, we will hear from our wonderful speakers on why they are part of this fight for comfort women justice, before segueing into the movement demands. Our community engagement intern, Erica Nava, will also take us through the many actions that you can take to help propel this movement forward. And then finally, we will close out. Kenwin's been involved in the comfort women justice movement here in Chicago for a number of years now. And as I've mentioned previously, our work with survivors directly informs what commitments we make in the larger effort against violence. Now, I want to introduce Dr. Liz Son, who will speak more on the comfort women movement. Liz Son is an associate professor in the Department of Theater at Northwestern University. She wrote a book on performance-based art and activism in support of comfort women survivors, and is a member of Kenwin's Comfort Women Advocacy team. Hey, Liz.
Hey, Denise. Thanks so much. The term comfort women is a euphemism for the estimated 200,000 young women and girls coerced into sexual slavery by the Japanese imperial military in the years leading up to and during World War II. What distinguished the so-called comfort system from other militarized sexual violence at the time was its institutionalized, systematic nature and the number and ethnic diversity of the victims. Victims were forcibly taken from Japan's colonies and occupied territories, including but not limited to Korea, China, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Indonesia. These girls and young women endured unspeakable violence during their captivity in camps throughout Asia and the Pacific Islands. When survivors began coming forward in the early 1990s, they helped galvanize a social movement for redress. Activists have pursued political and legal redress that is centered on the Japanese government's acknowledgement of Japanese military sexual slavery, an official apology, and reparations. To this day, the Japanese government continues to deny survivors full reparative measures. In response to a long history of state denials and obfuscations and half-hearted apologetic innuendos, a vibrant transnational network of local activists has organized throughout Asia, Europe, and the United States. At the center of this movement are the comfort women survivors. These women have inspired the world with their exemplary example of survivor leadership. Comfort women survivors have bravely shared their experiences, spoken out against perpetrators and deniers, and advocated for themselves and other survivors of sexual violence. We believe that survivor leadership is imperative in cultivating a meaningful movement to eradicate gender-based violence wherever it exists. And we continually learn and gain inspiration from the comfort women survivor activists.
Thank you, Liz. That was so informative and a great opener as usual. On July 29th, a small contingent of our staff headed to downtown Chicago to make our presence known. Persistence and continuity are hallmarks of the comfort women movement. For example, even during COVID, the Wednesday demonstrations in Seoul have gone on. We had the chance to document our own demonstration on camera, so let's tune in.
Hello everyone, we're at the intersection of Michigan and Chicago Avenue near the Japanese Embassy in Chicago, Illinois, United States. This is the Statue of Peace. The Statue of Peace, also called Sonyasang in Korean, is a symbol of the victims of sexual slavery, euphemistically known as comfort women by the Japanese military before and during the World War II. Survivor activists and advocates started the Wednesday demonstration in 1992 in South Korea to call for justice long overdue and demand an official apology from the Japanese government, which to this day has failed to do so. On the thousands Wednesday demonstration, the first Statue of Peace was erected in front of the Japanese embassy to honor victims and survivors, as well as to call for remembrance of the comfort woman issue. The statue captures the image of a young girl in traditional hanbok in remembrance of the underage girls who were abducted and taken to Japanese military comfort stations. Visually, it represents the Korean victims, while as a whole, the statue symbolizes the historical period and the vulnerability of all women exploited by the Japanese military in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, let us have a closer look at the statue. The Statue of Peace embodies the appearance of a victim of a Japanese military comfort woman, and the girl sits barefoot with her heels slightly held tightly on a chair with short hair that is irregularly cut. There's a bird sitting on the girl's left shoulder in a shadow of a grandma on the floor. There's an empty chair placed next to the girl statue. The hair. Korean girls at the time kept their hair well groomed and would not have thoughtlessly cut it short. Yet the statue reveals that the girl's hair is not just short, it is also lanky and disheveled. This reflects how the girls were violently taken from their family and household. Also, the statue's cropped hair shows how these girls had their relationships with family and friends or their communities cut off against their will. The face is one who is angry about their treatment, but unafraid and with the will to resolve this issue. The bird is a symbol of peace, freedom, and liberation. It connects those victims who have returned to the sky and the ones who are still left on the ground. The clenched fists represent the victims' determination to no longer stay silent about Japan's war crimes and their devotion to reveal the truth. The heels are raised and unattached to the ground. After the war, countless girls were not able to return home. Those who made it no longer felt they were at home. Innocent girls lived their entire lives with feelings of guilt as though they had committed sins. Even the Korean government ignored their sorrows and paid no attention to them. This represents the unstable lives of the victims, regarded as sluts or prostitutes and treated coldly by society, even in their hometowns. The old woman as a shadow. Despite the statue being a girl, its shadow is that of an old woman with a white butterfly in her heart. It represents today's figure of the young girls who were abducted long ago. The shadow symbolizes the time that has passed without an official apology from Japan, which has turned the girl into an old woman who must still live with no recognition of the crimes committed against her. The shadow alludes to these hardships that the victims and survivors had to suffer all this time and the long-kept hope to become free like a butterfly. The empty chair symbolizes the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of the women who have passed away remain on this chair to accompany the girl. People who encounter the statue now are invited to sit down next to the girl and consider what she must have felt back then. Thus, they are able to comprehend the current appeals and emotions of the now aged woman. Lastly, this spot represents a promise. Onlookers can join the demands of the victims who nowadays are engaged as peace activists, taking a stand for a world without war. And last but not least, the empty chair also stands for all the unknown comfort woman victims. The Statue of Peace can be found all over the world. There are also other statues representing victims from China and the Philippines. Although these statues may look different, altogether, they symbolize the pain of the victims of the Japanese military sexual slavery, the survivors' ongoing pursuit for justice and restoration of their human dignity, and hope for a future without sexual violence. Now, it's your turn to come sit with her.
This year, due to the pandemic, we could not invite to the rally our community members whose presence at past Global Action Days has always been so vital in amplifying the movement's goals. Usually, we ask folks to sit with the statue as a way of reflecting, feeling, grounding their place in the movement, whatever it is that they needed in the moment. For this year's Global Action Day, we invited past participants of our Come Sit With Her performance to share their experience with us.
그분들의 긴 세월 동안 겪은 고통을 나도 조금 남아 느끼는 것 같고 그분들의 영혼들을 위로해드리는 마음이 든다. 얼마나 나라가 원망스러웠을까. 나라를 잃고 희생당한 힘없는 위안부 소녀님들께 약속한다.
Although I was individually sitting next to her, there was also this communal energy and power that emanated from that rally, and the understanding that we were all sharing one individual moment with her, but at the same time we were all surrounding her, we were together, and that sort of collective, collaborative moment was very empowering for me.
I've decided to sit next to Comfort Women for global human rights to prevent this from happening in the future. Some people say that the issue of Comfort Women is done. However, history repeats itself if we don't remember. No one should go through this tragedy again.
When I am sitting with the Statue of Peace, I am remembering all the women and girls whose lives have been affected by male violence. The Comfort Women's struggle to bring truth and justice inspires me to take action in the movement to combat male violence against women and girls.
I care about Comfort Women because they had their families and their futures stolen from them. They were daughters and sisters, and some have since become mothers or caretakers. Some, like Kim Bok-dong, had hoped to study in college.
I chose to stand with the statue during the march because I wanted to contribute in some small way to the act of collective witness and remembrance that was happening during that day of the rally.
I want to hold my community accountable in our complacency with sexual violence and historical erasure and commit to unlearning this imposed history and committing to do better. And so I know we must be working to build a future where women, femmes, trans people, gender nonconforming people can be free from patriarchal violence.
I understand that my support might seem very trivial if alone, but by partaking in the Comfort Women rally, I was able to add myself to the greater number of people sitting in solidarity, especially as I was able to give a brief speech with one of my YPAL members. The sheer fact that everyone who was a part of the rally and those who were merely walking around Chicago downtown all paid attention to what I was saying, a call to action.
The reason why I sat beside her was to accompany with the victims of Comfort Women issue and to remember this issue. We should not forget the history, and this issue should be taught to the next generation to remember and not to happen again.
I sat next to the statue as a demonstration of solidarity and to honor the memory and experiences of the countless Comfort women and girls. The tolerance of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
I think this issue is still important to this day because the rape culture that allowed it to go undocumented and unnoticed for so long is still prevalent. And this sitting next to her was kind of like a bridge between my ethnic heritage and the continuing fight against sexual violence.
While there has not yet been an official apology or redress, sitting with the statue shows that no matter how long the struggle is, we are ready to educate others, we're ready to organize them, we're ready to mobilize.
I felt a huge sense of responsibility and obligation to fulfill my duty as a live statue. And on the day of the performance, I purposely distanced myself emotionally, and I sat on the chair repeatedly thinking to myself, don't cry. I did not want to ruin the performance, so I did not let myself fully immerse and reflect on this experience.
When I sat down beside the statue, I started crying a lot because I felt their pain deeply. And also I regret deeply not involved before and not advocate before.
위안부 이슈는 저희 제 민족의 이슈이기도 하지만 또 그를 넘어서 세계 각지에서 벌어지고 있는 gender-based violence, 특히 성에 기반된 폭력, 특히 국가가 주체가 되어서 벌어진 이런 폭력의 가장 중요한 예라고 생각하기 때문에 관심을 가지게 되었습니다.
제가 위안부 이슈에 관심을 갖는 이유는 그것의 문제점이 현재에도 여전히 존재하기 때문입니다. 저는 위안부 문제를 다루는 것이 곧 오늘날의 역사 왜곡, 성차별, 불법 성매매, 전쟁 등에 대해 맞대응하는 방법이라고 생각합니다.
Not only are these survivors, but they're such strong women. And I feel like their stories were inspiring and continue to be so.
또 이렇게 함께 같이 하는 사람들이 있다는 것으로 인해 위로받지 않을까. 또 하여간 저희들이 지켜드리지 못한 것에 대한 조그만 죄책감을 씻을 수 있지 않을까. 그런 마음에 했고요.
Come sit with her.
I ask you to come sit with her.
I invite you to come sit with her.
Come sit with her.
Come sit with her.
So please, come sit with her.
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 Join me. Come sit with her.
Come sit with her.
Ven y siéntate con ella.
I'm not showing up. Okay. Now let's hear from the speakers joining us from Awakenings Gallery, CBCAC, and Korean Council.
My name is Jerry Fredrickson. I am the creative director at Awakenings. It is my honor to join in solidarity with the survivors because I believe the survivors. I believe in their calls for justice and for redress. I believe that healing and peace within our larger community is a possible and continued creation throughout this movement. Awakenings and Can Win have been partnering to create a season of programs called Embodying Justice. This programming centers around reproductions of artwork made by the Comfort Women survivors being exhibited at Awakenings Gallery. We are all extremely honored that these paintings will be in the gallery in summer 2021. Awakenings and Can Win created this guiding statement together. Embodying Justice's mission is to showcase the power of survivors' storytelling through art to instigate social and political change. We seek to promote the awareness of ongoing activism of survivors of Japanese military sexual slavery who were euphemistically called comfort women before and during World War II. Through art, we seek to spark discussion about connections to contemporary sexual violence in relation to state violence. Inspired by the women using art as a living testimony, we envision creating a local movement in solidarity with global activism. While summer 2021 feels a long way off, I invite everyone to read the Embodying Justice literary pieces in Awakening's 10th literary magazine issue that is already published on the website. And I invite everyone to all of the programs Awakenings and Can Win are planning for 2021. Thank you to everyone at Can Win for hosting this event and finding a way for me to join in solidarity with this movement in a virtual space. And my humble and most respectful thanks to the survivors for sharing your story and for leading this movement.
Hi, my name is Laura Kinter. I'm the Executive Director of Awakenings. I am joining Can Win and survivors all over the world in solidarity for this Global Action Day because I believe that sexual violence loses its power when the truth is exposed. I believe in the resiliency and the healing brought about by community, and even though we can't gather together today, we can still spread the message of healing and justice. Even though these horrific events occurred many years ago, I believe it's our duty to promote awareness of the past so that we can set intentions for our future and heal together. While I'm so sad that our exhibit Embodying Justice can't happen this year because of the pandemic, I'm still so excited about the relationship that Awakenings and Canwin have created, and we are so excited to continue helping survivors heal through art and community, today especially.
Hello, I'm Grace Chan McKibben, Executive Director of CBCAC, the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. CBCAC is an organization based in Chicago's Chinatown that works to unite community resources and to engage and empower the residents in the greater Chinatown area through civic education, community organizing, and policy advocacy. Through our work, we seek to create a more just, inclusive, and equitable world. Comfort women were women and girls who were forced into being sex slaves during World War II, and is a sad and shameful part of Asian American history. CBCAC stands with Canwin on its 8th Global Action Day for Justice for Comfort Women. In courageously shining a light on this dark part of history, Canwin is calling all people to reject objectification of women and girls, to reject male dominance in society, and to uplift the power of women, girls, and all non-male identifying folks. Together, we will ensure that all are equal in our society, regardless of gender or gender identification.
안녕하세요. 지난 4월 말에 정의기억연대 새로운 이사장이 된 이태양입니다. 처음 인사드립니다. 반갑습니다. 네, 이사장이 되자마자 사실은 정의기억연대와 관련된 여러 가지 의혹들이 언론을 통해 제기됐고요. 이를 통해서 검찰 조사를 받고 있습니다. 아마 해외에 계신 여러분들께서도 굉장히 큰 충격을 받으셨을 것이고요. 또한 언론과 검찰의 공격에 대해서 커다란 분노와 슬픔을 일으키고 계시지 않습니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 변함없이 저희들을 지지하고 응원해 주시고 흔들림 없는 자세로 일본군 성노예제 문제 해결 운동을 해나가고 계셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다. 저희도 지금까지 30년 동안 이뤄왔던 선배들 그리고 여러분들의 정신과 용기를 이어받아 앞으로도 이 문제 해결에 앞장서서 흔들림 없이 나갈 수 있도록 노력하겠습니다. 올해는 제8차 세계 일본군 위안부 기린이를 맞이하게 됐고요. 이를 기회로 또 세계 연대 집회를 변함없이 이끌어 나가고자 합니다. 올해 저희 주제는 사실상 1991년 김학술 김하로 이후에 나온 국내외 많은 피해자들의 용기와 정신을 우리 스스로가 계승하고 또 그 다음 세대 끊임없는 깊은 공명을 울리기 위한 그런 자세를 다잡는 것으로 잡았습니다. 그래서 그녀들의 말하기 우리가 영원히 기억한다. 그리고 끝없이 공명한다. 무엇보다 무한대로 확장한다는 슬로건을 걸게 되었는데요. 그 이유는 김학순들이 만들어내는 그 깊은 공명이 더 깊은 울림으로 전 세계에 퍼지고 그리고 그가 만들어낸 작은 파동이 또 전 세계에 끊임없이 큰 파장이 되어 이 지구를 흔들었듯이 그 역사를 우리가 다시 한번 기억하고 끊임없이 기록하고 또 소리내겠다는 다짐이기도 합니다. 해외에 계신 여러분들께서도 당시에 우리 피해자들의 이야기를 한 번 더 생각해 주시고요. 또 우리 스스로가 이 이야기를 다시 한번 환기하면서 그 다음 세대에 물려주고자 다짐해 주시기를 진심으로 바랍니다. 앞으로도 어려운 일이 많으시겠지만 일본군 성노예제 문제 해결을 위해서 다 함께 손잡고 용기 있게 이어나가기를 간절히 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
We also have two great speakers tuning in for today's rally. First is Joy of Gabriela Chicago, a grassroots organization fighting for the liberation of Filipino women. Hey, Joy, I'm handing it off to you.
Hello, my name is Joy Salas, and I'm the chairperson of Gabriela Chicago. Thank you again to Canwin for inviting us to this virtual Global Day of Action. Gabriella is an alliance in the Philippines and around the world dedicated to the liberation of women from imperialism, capitalism, feudalism, and heteropatriarchy. During World War II, an estimated 1,000 women and girls in the Philippines were kidnapped and put into sexual slavery. In 1992, Gabriella started a task force to organize Comfort Women survivors to go public with their stories. And survivor Rosa Henson was the first one to speak up. Henson and dozens more would later become part of Lila Pilipina, an organization part of Gabriella that gathers survivors of wartime sexual slavery. The organization documented 200 cases, and today only 8 members are left, with the youngest being 89. In 2018, the Comfort Woman statue in Manila was taken down for supposedly construction-related reasons. Many advocates believe, however, that it was related to a multi-billion-dollar trade agreement with Japan. The remaining Comfort Women survivors, affectionately called Lolas or Grandmas, said that they, quote, can't count on President Rodrigo Duterte. He's a lapdog to the Japanese. We only want justice for the damage done to us, end quote. This case further exposed the Duterte government's deliberate attacks on women. Japan's revisionist take on World War II is not possible without authoritarians like Duterte, who prioritize profit over the lives and dignity of women and girls. This incident is one of many that shows how sexual violence is a means, not merely a byproduct of war. Although Comfort Women activists were able to put up a new memorial in 2019, the Philippine government may attempt to delegitimize Comfort Women activists again. But as women and girls in the Philippines and the diaspora, we are inspired by the courage of our Lolas, and we will continue to stand against imperialism, militarism, and fascism. Long live international solidarity. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. That was great. Now we have Izzy, a member of Elevate, Canwin's youth group, who will share an excerpt from her essay in the May issue of Awakenings magazine. Hey, Izzy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Izzy, a member of Canwin's youth group, Elevate. As someone who loves creative writing, I often observe motifs of political partition and historical trauma emerge in my poems, essays, and fiction. Deeply personal writing has the potential to elucidate emotional vulnerability as a means of introspection and redemption, a way of emphasizing shared humanity in a way that academic writing cannot. When I engage in creative writing, the issue of the Comfort Women often occupies my thoughts. It serves as a testament to how meaningful that moment in history is to me, to my sense of self, as well as my ethnic and cultural inheritance. Whenever I ruminate on the Comfort Women issue, more specifically the practice of using the written word to examine and make sense of the brutality that the era engendered, I think back to some thoughts that Vietnamese American writer Ocean Vuong shared in an interview with Tricycle, a Buddhist journal. When prompted to reflect on his creative process, Vuong speaks to the dichotomy between fear and compassion. These dual forces, he contends, each provide a reservoir of energy that creators, thinkers, and activists alike may draw from to fuel their practice. He says, open quote, "We see bombs being dropped. We see bullets put into bodies, all from fear. It is a powerful energy. But compassion is an energy too. Every day when we wake up, we have a choice. Will we choose fear or will we choose compassion and love?" End quote. Much has been done in the name of Comfort Women in my local community and in the global community at large. Much still needs to be done. The largest gift of being part of the movement has undoubtedly been learning from and being inspired by fellow fighters. There are a multitude of stories and values that mobilize these individuals. However, Underlying all these efforts is compassion, that core emotive impetus that Vuong and so many others place such unwavering trust in. I stand in solidarity with Comfort Women and continue fighting, knowing that our work is never done, knowing that this story must persist. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Izzy and Joy, for sharing your vision and presence with us. Also, yes to compassion and yes to international solidarity. So at this point, you're probably wondering, what are the demands of the Comfort Women movement? Who are they aimed at? With each Global Action Day, we've brought our rally to the doors of the Japanese consulate in downtown Chicago. Each year, we've made it so that they cannot ignore the demands of the Comfort Women survivor activists. This year was no different.
Kim Bok-dong, Wei Xiaolan, Rosa Hansen, Gil Won-ok, Kao Mei-hao, Kim Hak-sun, Narcisa Cleverio, Lee Yong-soo. These are the names of young women and girls who were violently taken away from their homes to serve as sex slaves by the Japanese military before and during World War II. The list goes on. About 200,000 more names of women and girls who are subjected to relentless rape, torture, and starvation for several years by the soldiers. The Japanese military called them comfort women, a term designed to deceitfully sanitize, silence, and erase the pain and trauma that was inflicted on hundreds of thousands of victims. Survivors of this horrific crime are still waiting for restoration of their human dignity as the Japanese government continues to evade official responsibility. In reality, the government actively works to deny, minimize, and cover up the overwhelming evidence of the crime. Violence left unaccounted only works to breed further violence. Denying acts of violence and oppression does not lead to their erasure, but in fact exacerbates experiences of trauma, making their impact not only lifelong, but intergenerational as well. Thus, for the past 30 years, survivors have taken it upon themselves to fight for their own justice. They have traveled around the world to share their stories and advocate not just for themselves, but for a world without war and sexual violence. As advocates for victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence, we at CanWin are dedicated to Comfort Women advocacy. Our vision for a better world aligns with the spirit of the Comfort Women survivor activists who, in demanding their own justice, cry for the justice that is due to anyone who has experienced sexual violence. To be part of this global movement is our declaration that CanWin will not stand idle or tolerant to state-sanctioned rape and torture. As an agency comprised of immigrants and Asian Americans, the matter has never been about where or when sexual violence happens, but on how we can challenge the base conditions that permit this violence to be mundane and commonplace. So today we join the survivors to make our demands for justice. We demand the Japanese government to 1. Admit the Japanese military sexual slavery system as a war crime. 2. Issue an official apology and reparations to the survivors. 3. Stop all forms of actions that defame honor and human rights of the survivors. 4. Disclose all documents related to the Japanese military sexual slavery and conduct a thorough investigation rather than covering them up. 5. Stop all efforts to withdraw peace statues established around the world. 6. Record the sexual slavery system in history textbooks to educate and prevent such crime from ever happening again. We urge our Chicago community to join us in the Comfort Women Justice movement. Let us work together to remember and honor survivors and their stories. Let us continue their legacy by uplifting their rights, and in doing so, uplift the rights of all survivors.
"75 years after the end of World War II, we are still waiting for an apology from the Japanese government. At CanWin, we work with survivors of gender-based violence to seek justice at courts and beyond. Collectively, what they long for the most are the harm doers' admittance of their action, a sincere apology, and a commitment to right the wrong. When the Japanese government refuses to hear the comfort women survivors' demands, it's adding whole new layers of trauma upon them and all the other survivors around the globe. Because the harm doers' inaction and denial also constitute violence. What the Japanese government is doing, ignoring, discrediting, shunning those who have suffered their violence, is so classic of state violence. But that does not mean we will tolerate it. Some will justify the comfort women system and its violence because it occurred during war. But is that supposed to make the issues something that we can then stomach? Others in the government have even said that the girls and women chose it. But is that choice ever possible when we look at the way power is stacked? We must hold states accountable for the past injustices because sexual violence remains a convenient talking point and not the thing to wipe out. This being the case, no rally would be complete without action steps. This summer, we have two amazing community engagement interns, Erica and Hannah, who have been doing some incredible work to make the comfort women issue less intractable. We're also turning on the chat box now, so you can make comments or ask questions. And now I'm going to hand it off to Erica, who will take us through the action guide, toolkit, and more. Hey, Erica.
Hi, Denise. Thank you for the intro. So echoing Denise's words, our continued support and solidarity for the victims does not end here. Our work continues through our actions as a collective, and we must continue to show up for these women and for the thousands more who experience sexual violence across the world. So to get people started, I'm going to talk about the action guide and a few of the steps that are involved in the action guide. So the first one is to request a education from CanWin. So you could request a workshop that specifically talks about the comfort women advocacy work that is happening. And you can also pair up with other organizations that also do this work or create some form of workshop that focuses on this. The next step is to host a film screening with your peers. So you can also team up with CanWin or host your own film screening of any of these suggested films. There are also ways that you can read up on the history of the movement and the actual testimonies of the women who survived through all of this violence. And then there is a website for comfort women that CanWin created, or our intern Hannah created. Very, very nice website, and it has a lot of information in terms of advocacy work, educational resources. There's also testimonies of comfort women. There's also event corner where it lets you know of any future events that CanWin is going to host or any other orgs. And then there is another online campaign, which I will go more specifically over once I turn it over to the toolkit, which is a deeper and more complex list of action steps and looking more at what the comfort women issue is, who is CanWin and the work that they do. It also looks at more specifically the demands for the comfort women issue and very important action steps on our social media campaign. So the first step is to take a picture of yourself in a chair and to upload it to social media with any of these following hashtags. And also you can talk about your own personal experience about what it felt like to sit in a chair in solidarity with these comfort women. There are also other resources on learning what other organizations are doing and to also how you can directly support them, which also looks like donations because a lot of these orgs need a lot of resources and that requires money. So directly donating also helps in directly supporting these women and other people who experience sexual violence across the world. So yes, the toolkit is just a much deeper look at other steps that you could take. And there are also other videos and articles that you can look at within the toolkit. And then Denise. Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. All right, so the link should have been shared in the chat, so please look out for those. And as we begin to wrap up our rally, I want to flag that CanWin will be holding an educational workshop with Liz on the comfort women issue. We strongly encourage folks to attend if you want to learn more about the movement, performance, or want to know the best practices on how to tackle this topic with the people in your life. Dates are still being worked out, but it will likely be in early September, and we'll definitely send out more information. Liz's workshop will kick off a season of programming on comfort women advocacy, so please keep us on your radar. In the meantime, we have a poll for you all. We want to know, what actions are you committing to? The anger, sadness, whatever it is that you might feel right now, how are we going to channel it? And if you have any ideas, hello, sorry, technical issues. Okay, as I was saying, in the meantime, we have a poll for you all. So please share with us what you want to commit to. And if there's something that's not on the screen, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we can work together to make it happen. So I'm going to open it now. All right, I'm going to close the poll now. Yeah, and here are the results. So it looks like a lot of people will definitely be sharing the live stream, which is great. And then also our social media campaign. Yay. All right. So let's bring our Comfort Women Advocacy team members and our speakers back on screen.
We invite all of you to come sit with her.
All right. Thank you to our speakers for coming back on screen and also to just part of our internal team on Comfort Women Advocacy. Thank you so much. All right. And of course, thank you all so much, everyone, for being part of this year's virtual Global Action Day. We're so excited that this movement is growing, that's becoming more localized and global at the same time, and that more and more people are learning and engaging with this important issue. If there is one parting message that I could share with you all, it's that this movement is a fight for all of those who have experienced sexual violence. This movement makes so clear that the power we can amass across generations, borders, ages, to bind states to the accountability that is due for the violence that they cause, past and present. So this concludes our virtual rally. You are welcome to stick around for the music before we close out the Zoom. And my contact information is on the screen if you want to connect in the future to work on future events or programming. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for tuning in.